Thanks.
Hello, welcome to Government Connection. My name is Vicki Evans. Coronado National Forest is Tucson's Sky Island escape for recreation, and it's a wonderful destination. As many of us know, fires and floods have recently devastated many of the beloved areas of the Coronado National Forest, but it survives and does well. And we're going to learn more about this wonderful place that's soon to celebrate its 100th anniversary as we welcome Janine Derby. And Janine is the Coronado National Forest Supervisor. Thank you so much for being here. And we also welcome John Abel. And John is the Deputy of Communications and Special Projects. So again, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Janine, describe to us, what is Coronado National Forest?
It's about 1,780,000 acres of beautiful lands, sky islands we call them, 12 separate mountain ranges in southeastern Arizona, and consists of 5 districts managed from Nogales, from Sierra Vista, Douglas, Safford, and Tucson. And all of those places have their own special features.
So would you say special features from what to what? From desert to a sky island?
Desert to the mountaintop forest is, sometimes it's described as being able to travel from here to Canada in just a 2-hour trip. As you drive up the mountains, you're passing through all of those life zones.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And what is a sky island?
A sky island is the mountain in a sea of desert, basically. You know, these mountains pop up out of the desert, and they provide, you know, relief, scenic background for people's homes, year-round recreation. They're great for biological diversity and geological diversity.
Right. I know that the Centennial Celebration is coming up. John, just start us off, and then Janine, take over as to what people can expect. So when is the actual birthday, John?
The birthday of the Coronado National Forest is July 2nd of 2008. The Coronado is a Cancer, for those of you who like astrology. We'll be having a special event this year. We'll be celebrating at a Sidewinders game on July 2nd. Smokey Bear will actually be in attendance. He'll be helping us throw out the baseball that night. We'll have displays. We'll have people on hand who will be there to help answer questions.
All right. Anything else, Janine, in the way of celebrating?
Well, during July, of course, the 4th of July, many of our communities will experience the Forest Service participating in their parades. And then in the fall, we will have an all-employee meeting, and we'll have lots of opportunities for the whole forest to celebrate together.
Right. And July 4th is a big camping month, isn't it? Or a big camping long weekend, or use of the outdoor recreation areas in the forest, right?
Yes, yes. So we get lots of business at that time.
It is, and I might say one of the principal things we'll be doing at the Sidewinders game that day is reminding people of fire danger. I suspect that we'll still be in the middle of fire season, and we'll be having a fire prevention message there, and we'll be also handing out some free baseballs, Smokey baseballs.
Right. Ooh, I really like Smokey the Bear, just because I liked him when I was little, so I still have an affinity. But onward. Talk a little about, Janine, Coronado National Forest as we know it.
Yes, the Coronado National Forest is, you know, it's changed a lot in 100 years, and one of our main businesses over the years has been fire. We are looking at fire on the landscape to accomplish fuels goals. Sometimes it improves wildlife habitat and watershed benefits, even reducing the potential for insect outbreaks, basically restoring the health of the land.
Right, right. And so in many cases the appearance has changed then, correct?
The appearance has changed significantly, and we're looking back in history finding that the people who managed the forest then, of course, were all men. And
That's right,
now,
yeah.
I would say probably half of our workforce
Oh, wow.
is a woman. We strive to carry out our mission of caring for the land and serving people. There's an example was just shown of all the men in the forest who used to help us manage these
Right.
lands. And now we have the opportunity for different aspects of our culture to come into play. And
For an example.
we do a great deal with the Indian tribes, whose land this was at one time. They gather their materials for making baskets on our lands, and we support their elders teaching the younger generation their culture.
Right, right. And you know, speaking of changes in the way that you've been doing business, managing fires has changed. And really, at least to the public, it seems, within the last even 5 to 10 years.
Yes.
So talk a little about this, Janine.
Yes, the fires, as I mentioned earlier, you know, really fire is what restores the health of the land. These lands evolved under fire regimes that are no longer managed in the same way. In fact, for many years we suppressed fires. Now,
And that reason, the thinking then being?
the thinking was very strongly Smokey Bear's message, you know, fire is not a good thing on the landscape. However, we now understand that there's a time and place to introduce fire to the landscape, and so we are now doing more of that, prescribed fire.
All right. So what is it? What is a prescribed fire, and what are the benefits?
Prescribed fire is applying fire deliberately to the landscape with a certain objective in mind. And usually the main objective is to reduce the fuels, but it's also important.
So let's look at this picture. So when you're saying fuels, what would be considered fuels there, Janine?
The vegetation itself, the growing vegetation, is fuel, and the dead vegetation that stays on the ground is another form of fuel. It's basically organic matter that has, it's preparing to return to the land, but it's not totally being restored until a fire comes through, refreshes that landscape, and allows the new vegetation to grow back.
What is some of the first growing vegetation after a fire in this area? Let's say close to, you know, in the ranges close to Tucson.
Well, many of the desert shrubs will resprout after fire. They actually, the root system is sustained and
Even with that, huh?
revitalized by fire, and new sprouts come. That's part of the objective in for a wildlife habitat.
Right, right. And in the actual, when you reach like Mount Lemmon, what is what they call the supreme? I'm thinking of Colorado, where I grew up, part of, you know, and it was blue spruce was the kind of the ultimate.
We have ponderosa pine, we have white fir, Douglas fir, mixed conifer trees.
And
on
they
Mount
need
Lemmon.
this fire too for health.
In the conifer zone, basically, sometimes we have too many trees on the landscape, and because fire has been suppressed over time, all of those trees attempting to grow up, the land just can't support all of them.
Right,
and so
right.
frequent fire allows the land to support only what it can
Right.
sustain.
Let's talk a little, maybe John can jump in, and please feel free to also, Janine, with the, am I saying this correctly, the Agua Caliente prescribed fire?
Correct. That was a prescribed fire that we just completed in Reddington Pass. We actually conducted a prescribed fire over 11,000 acres. That's about 13 or 14 square miles. We were so successful, I think most people in Tucson may not even have noticed. They might have seen the smoke. It was very successful. We accomplished what we wanted. We had a great deal of patchiness, which is where Some of the vegetation doesn't burn at all. Some burns very slightly, and then some vegetation burns. So in that regard, that's exactly what we were looking for, and that's what we got. So it was a very well-conducted burn.
So compare that, Janine, with the Bullock, or I say Bullock wildfire, which was in
Yes.
2002 and
Yes,
scared us all.
that's right. The Bullock wildfire occurred at a time when we hadn't expected it, of course, so we weren't there right on spot to manage it. And it became quite a conflagration, burned many acres that had not burned in a long time, burned mostly at a high intensity. And the landscape really had a hard time recovering in some places.
It did.
Yes.
So were you, as a veteran forest, supervisor, forest manager, have you been surprised at some of the growth, though, in that area? Have you thought, oh my gosh, I didn't expect,
Well, I have been, my background's fire ecology, and so I have enjoyed, in many places that I've worked, watching what happens after fire. And it is quite miraculous how the vegetation does return. It does take a longer time when it burns on a very high intensity.
As the Bullock fire was.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. And then, John, what about Fry Mesa fire? And tell us where that...
Fry Mesa occurred over near Safford in the Peñueño Mountains. It began as a prescribed fire. Unfortunately, we had a very severe weather event, an unexpected weather event in the middle of it, and it became a small wildfire that we then suppressed.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Mm-hmm. Because I think people think, oh my gosh, they let it get away.
Yes. Well, prescribed fire is an art. It's a matter of looking at the terrain, planning ahead for the contingencies, but a weather event can take it off track. We never want that to happen. Sometimes it does happen, and then what we do is learn from our successes and our escapes and continue to do better as we continue the program.
Right, right. So you talked a little about how fire improves the health of ecosystems. So what about wildlife and habitat? What happens there? Because that's an ecosystem,
Yes.
or an interactive one, I
Right.
think. So what happens there?
Some wildlife species really need openings in vegetation. When the vegetation grows very densely, the wildlife can't get at the food that they need. They don't have the browse species that they need, the young shoots growing as opposed to the older
So they'll
branches.
kind of move on, right?
So they leave that habitat to find something that's more compatible with their needs.
Right.
A fire will bring wildlife back into a place where they have not had the opportunity to live for a while.
Right, right. And John, when you talk about prescribed fires, is summer or late spring, is that a great time of the year to do it?
It really depends on the vegetation type that the prescribed fire is occurring in, but typically it is the best time. As Janine said, it's something of an art. We actually need to have sufficiently warm temperatures to attain the objectives of the burn. So typically we can't burn in cold winter climate or at higher elevations even early in the spring. We have to wait until later in the year.
Right. So I think we've got a slide for you of the team, the team that did this successful Agua Caliente prescribed burn, and then and that was wow.
Yes.
A lot of and that's up Redington, correct? Is this right there at Redington?
That's at Redington Pass, and
11,000 acres, very good.
yes.
And then after this, we've got something of the is it Whitmer?
The
Whitmire
fire was in the Palancios, close to the New Mexico border. And that particular fire was in shrub and grassland. And I think there is a shot that shows that at some point. Maybe
Right, I
we'll
think we've got it
find
here.
that. Okay, that's good. Yes, that's the kind of grassland, shrublands that can benefit from fire. That was set up as a research burn. Researchers wanted to learn what the effects were in contrasting winter burns with summer burns.
What did they learn?
Well, that's yet to be known. They
Collected
need
all the
to-
data, huh?
Well, once the fire burns, then they have to go back and watch the regrowth.
Oh my gosh, I see.
And they might get a different set of species growing in the summer after a burn than they would have in the winter. They might have more vigor in the resprouting plants, that sort of thing.
Right. Keeping a national forest healthy is of course, because we as citizens, we are using our national forests more, aren't we? Then, I mean, we're really learning to enjoy them. And
the national forests are a tremendous treasure, and the more our population grows, the more valuable those lands are for people to have a place of solitude and a place to really enjoy.
Right, okay. And we are talking to Janine Derby and John Abel with Coronado National Forest, soon to celebrate its 100-year birthday. And we'd like to, if you want to contact or go to their website, we'd like to share that information with you. And the Coronado National Forest, the headquarters, I would assume, are here in Tucson.
That's right.
300 West Congress. And you can always call 388-8300. That's 388-8300. And check out the website at fs.fed.us/r3 Coronado. Once more, fs.fed.us/r3 Coronado. Great website. I highly recommend you check it out. And we're going to switch gears a little from prescribed fires, but also something equally as important, John, and that's the controversy mining on Forest Service land, and in particular, it's the open pit copper mine, the Rosemont mine is it being called. So talk about what's going on there, John.
Right. I think most of the public realizes now that we have a proposal on the table from Rosemont Mining Company to develop an open pit copper mine about 30 miles southeast of Tucson in the Santa Rita Mountains. That's the mountain range due south of Tucson. It's just west of Highway 83, north of Sonoyta, south of the communities of Vail and Corona de Tucson. And that's a very interesting historical mining district. Actually, it's called the Helvetia Mining District, and it's been operational for over 100 years. Actually, they started mining in the 1880s.
Copper at that time too, copper,
Mainly
silver?
copper, but they've also taken out a significant amount of copper, a significant amount of zinc, molybdenum. There are probably other minerals there as well. They've actually taken out of the ground over 250,000 tons of ore since 1880. So it's been a very active mining area.
And then, over the last several decades, various mining companies have operated in that area, correct? And now, is it the Augusta Resource Company?
Augusta Resources Incorporated, that's correct. They're the latest company to give us a mine proposal there. They've been preceded, as you said, by a number of other mine companies. In the mid-1990s, ASARCO had a mine proposal on the table. They were involved in an effort to conduct a land swap in order to get the land that they felt they needed for their mine proposal. And at that time in 1994, they patented about 347 acres of land, which means that that land became private property.
So patented means private.
That's correct.
And the Forest Service sold it to them.
Yes, there's a small exchange of money, but it's not much. This is under the auspices of the 1872 mining law, which allows that kind of activity on national forest land. And since that time, the property again exchanged hands, and it eventually came into the hands of Augusta Resources. And Rosemont Mining Company has now presented the latest proposal. And that proposal is very complex, and it's very large, and it's something that the public has had approximately the last 3 months to take a look at.
Right.
It involves a large pit that would be, when it's completed, approximately a mile across.
Ooh.
And that
That's
pit,
big.
that is
Yes.
big, and it's if you compare it to other copper mines, it's perhaps not so big. If you look at the Ray mine a little bit further north, or the Morenci mine, those are probably substantially larger mines. But it's a large mine for obviously for that area. Nothing has ever gone in that large in the Helvetia mining district, so it is quite large. But it involves not only 1,000 acres approximately of private land, that's significantly where the pit itself will be located, but it also involves adjacent national forest land, actually about 3,300 acres of national forest
So
land.
close to 8,000 acres total for this operation.
It's a significant amount of acres, not only private land, Forest Service land, there's BLM land involved, there's also Arizona State Trust land involved. So there's a lot of parties involved in the project, and it's at the early stages of the proposal. We just received the proposal back in July of 2007. We took about 8 months to review that proposal, and only as recently as this last March, we got to the point where we deemed that proposal sufficient to begin a mandated NEPA process.
Right. John, may I just ask, are you, well, I think we've got a phone call. Is that correct, Eric? Good, all right. Do you mind taking a call?
Not at all.
All right. Lee, what's your question?
Hello?
Hello, Lee, what's your question?
Well, as I understand it, the Forest Service is part of the Department of Agriculture, and well, I'd like the panel there to address the issue of harvesting trees from the National Forest.
Oh, okay.
All right, thanks, Lee.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, well, we certainly do provide wood products to the public. We don't do a lot of commercial logging on the Coronado National Forest. There are other places that do. We provide fuel wood from trees on the Coronado National Forest.
All right, but not any real commercial operation.
Once in a while, we will have a project that produces enough logs that could be sold for timber products. But that's not a common part of what we do.
And they would go through the same process a little bit?
That's a very different process, but the environmental analysis that would allow that to happen is a similar process.
Okay. And we have another caller, Nancy. Please join us. What's your question? Are you there, Nancy?
Yes, I am. I read on the Coronado National Forest website that this actual Santa Rita Forest was established for a new use, and that was recreational use. And this was way after the 1872 mining law, so obviously it trumps the purpose, because it says clearly on your website it was created for a new purpose. And that's number one. And number two, when you say that this is going to be a small mine, how can you say that? Because the Rosemont Mining Company is buying up other ranches and also making other mining claims. Have you taken that into your account in your calculations?
All right, thanks, Nancy. The experts will try to get to all of it.
Well, first I'd like to go back to 1908 when the Santa Rita Forest Reserve was set aside, and it was actually set aside because of ranching practices. Part of what used to be the Santa Rita Range is now managed by the University of Arizona as the Santa Rita Experimental Range. And so that was one of the early reasons for establishing a forest reserve there, was for ranching, grazing management. Now, the second part of the question was recreation. That's certainly also a very important part, very important use of the National Forest today. I don't believe it was set aside for that, but certainly that's what it provides to today's clients.
All right. And we only have about 3 minutes. John, and I know there's a lot to be asked on and talked about on this issue of the Rosemont mine, but can you kind of lead us through who has the ultimate say? Does the public voice end with public hearings? Kind of take us through the steps and where public opinion can count.
Sure. The role of Forest Service in the process, of course, is to execute the laws of the United States. That's easy to say, but it's very difficult to do. We recognize that this is a very controversial issue, but we're proceeding in accordance with what the law directs us to do. Under the National Environmental Policy Act, we have begun to conduct the required environmental analysis, and in fact, we are now in what's called the scoping period. We are 3 months into a 4-month scoping period. We have had 6 open houses. We've had 2 hearings. We are going to have another hearing on June 30th, the evening of June 30th, in Central Tucson, Rincon High School. So the scoping period will go through July 14th. At the end of that process, we will go into the analysis, where we'll actually analyze all the comments that we've received in the scoping period, and we'll have a team of scientists and experts who will examine those. And there will be quite an extensive evaluation and examination of the comments during that period. And once we complete that, we will develop something called a draft environmental impact statement. And that, again, will go out for public review. There will be public participation throughout this process. And at the end, there will be a decision made about the mine plan that's actually on the table at the moment. And the decision maker is right beside me, the Forest Supervisor, Janine Derby.
Oh my, so you are the decision maker.
Yes. Yes, I will make the decision.
We're going to have to wrap it up.
Oh.
Okay, so
Yes.
Janine, the Forest Supervisor, will be making the decision. Lots of work ahead of you, Jean.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Very, very, very good information. Thanks again. Coronado National Forest. Thanks. Thanks.